Interesting.
Election. I'm Greg Bishop. It's right here live and local with you, watching what happens in Illinois so you can get on with your day. It was a long night last night with the primary election. We'll look at some of those results here in just a moment. After that, we'll hear from Senate Minority Leader John Curran about the challenge of the state's court's venue limit bill that is now in front of the Illinois Supreme Court. But all of that while you've got the underlying case there about the Firearms Industry Liability Act being used by the city of Chicago to go after Glock. So we'll talk about that coming up here with Bishop on Air. Good morning to everybody out there. You've got Brett sounding off, just someone, Kick and Wing, Keith, Randall, Captain Mike, Jerry, Bob, Rawhide, William, Christopher, David, Tenebris, AS3 SXP. You're going to have to explain to me sometime what that means. Anyways, appreciate you guys being here. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. God, I didn't get home last night until 10:30ish, close to 11. Really didn't close my eyes until about 11:30, but back at it because today the Illinois legislature also returns. So a busy week here with Bishop on Air. All right, so we got to take a look at the election results. Let's go ahead and do that. And to do that, let's start with some of the big things that happened up in Chicago, where you've got the Bring Chicago Home referendum that would have changed the city's real estate transfer tax to essentially say that if you are selling something over $1 million, you're going to get a higher tax. And they were looking to also lower the tax if it was under $1 million. All of this in an effort to try to curb homelessness. But if you're looking at the results last night, ABC7 tracking that, and it looks like 54% voted no, with 98% of the precincts reporting. 54% voting no. Now, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson holds a news conference today after the city council meeting, so it'll be interesting to see what he has to say about this. Also be interesting to see what the results look like in 2 weeks. In Illinois, we have mail-in balloting, which there's a grace period between Election Day and 2 weeks after for clerks to essentially collect outstanding mail-in ballots that they will have to count before that 2 weeks is up. And looking at the totals that the Illinois State Board of Elections said statewide, you've got, 677,000 mail-in ballots that were requested for the primary. But when you look at the numbers that were returned, there's still a substantial amount of outstanding ballots, like 277,000 or so. So a good chunk of hundreds of thousands of ballots still outstanding. And looking at the analysis of this, the outstanding mail-in ballots, you've also got just looking at the city of Chicago and data we pulled last night during the election. At thecentersquare.com, you've got around 41% of the mail-in ballots sent out by Illinois election authorities have yet been returned. Data from the State Board of Elections shows that Chicago had 181,000 people request mail-in ballots. 68,000 were returned. That leaves 113,000 mail-in ballots that could still be outstanding just in the city of Chicago. So how that could impact the ultimate outcome of the fate of Bring Chicago Home, rather interesting, especially when you look at those totals again from ABC7 showing that 166,000 no, 143,000 yes. What are those mail-in ballots going to look like? Meanwhile, also in Chicago and Cook County in particular, you've got the race for the Democrats and the state's attorney. And according to Cook County data, you've got the state's attorney's race pretty close. And in particular, between Clayton Harris and Eileen Burke. The difference there is 54% for Eileen Burke, 46% for Clayton Harris. I've got to delve into the actual numbers out of the city of Chicago, a separate polling place, but clearly it's a very close race there. Something else to note in Chicago and Cook County, voter turnout was about 17%. Here in Sangamon County, the last numbers I saw, voter turnout was about 14%. So clearly a lot of people stayed home. They just did not go out. And I don't know what the history has been as far as voter turnout, but under 20%, under 15% in some areas, yeah, that's pretty abysmal. Meanwhile, in congressional races, Darren Bailey lost to Mike Bost. And last night, Bost said it's time to look at November. When asked about Bailey, Bost ultimately said that he was a conservative running against a conservative. And he even went as far as to say that the issues that Bailey was trying to attack Bost on, Bost ultimately got the support of the various groups he said Bost didn't support. Like, for instance, pro-life groups supporting Bost and Second Amendment groups supporting Bost. So Bailey said that he hopes they sent a message to the establishment that, that they're not going to take just the status quo. So interesting to see that race turn out. And that will be a contested November election. You've got some Democrats there that ran against each other as well. And congressional races shaping up across the state for all of the 17 different congressional districts. So that's just a cursory review of some of the outcomes from last night. Still pending, of course, because of all of the outstanding mail-in ballots. So that'll be something to watch for the next 2 weeks here in the state of Illinois. All right, so appreciate you guys being here. Going to take a quick breather and come back and talk about Cook County suing, or rather the city of Chicago suing Glock over Glock switches using a state law that's already being challenged both in state and federal court. So we'll go down that rabbit hole next here with Bishop on Air. Appreciate you guys being here each and every weekday morning.
Well, first, let's characterize it properly. It's our law in the state of Illinois, and my reaction is it'll obviously run through the court system. I signed it. I think it's something that makes sense for just organizing the court system, so there's a lot of venue shopping going on by people who are just trying to find a friendly judge here or there. The experts that are, in the two venues that have been designated seem like they have handled constitutional related cases more than any others, and so it makes sense to me to have those cases run through.
That's Governor J.B. Pritzker last week talking about the law that he signed, essentially limiting where people can sue the state of Illinois, challenging constitutional rights being violated by state laws. And while a Madison County judge found that unconstitutional as applied in a case that Piasaw Armory brought against the state's firearm industry liability law, the state tried to move that to Sangamon County, one of two counties out of 102 counties that the state law says you can sue the state in. Well, the Madison County judge saying that venue limits law was unconstitutional. So the state went right to the Illinois Supreme Court, and that was filed earlier this week. This, while you've got the city of Chicago suing Glock over Glock switches. So let's go ahead and start there before I share with you some of the conversation I had with Senate Minority Leader John Curran with the city of Chicago announcing what they say is a first in the nation kind of lawsuit they say will hold Glock accountable. So let's pull this up and read through this together. This is a news release from the city of Chicago. It says fully automatic modified Glocks increasingly turning up at crime scenes in Chicago across the country. Over 1,100 modified Glocks recovered by Chicago police in the last 2 years. So the news release goes on to say the city of Chicago announcing a first of its kind lawsuit against Glock, the manufacturer of the most popular handguns in the United States, alleging that Glock's facilitating the proliferation of illegal machine guns on the streets of Chicago. The lawsuit alleges that Glock unreasonably endangers Chicagoans by manufacturing and selling the Chicago civilian markets semi-automatic pistols that can easily be converted to illegal machine guns with an auto-sear, a cheap, small device commonly known as a Glock switch. The suit is the first to use Illinois' new Firearms Industry Responsibility Act, passed and signed into law in 2023 to hold gun companies accountable for their conduct that endangers the public. Filed earlier today in Cook County Circuit Court, that's state court, not federal court, because this is a state law that they're using to sue Glock, not a federal law. But the lawsuit, the city says, reports that law enforcement personnel in Chicago have recovered over 1,100 Glocks that have been converted to illegal machine guns in the last 2 years alone, in connection with a wide variety of crimes, including homicides, aggravated assaults, batteries, kidnappings, burglaries, home invasions, carjackings, and attempted robberies. The lawsuit alleges that Glock knows it could fix the problem, but refuses to do so, and the city is seeking a court order requiring Glock to cease sales of its easily converted pistols to Chicago civilians. The city also seeks penalties against Glock and damages for the harm that Glock has caused the city. The city of Chicago is encountering a deadly new frontier in the gun violence plaguing our communities because of the increase of fully automatic Glocks on our streets, said Mayor Brandon Johnson, a member of the Mayors Against Illegal Guns. Selling firearms that can easily be converted into automatic weapons makes heinous acts even more deadly. So we're doing everything we can in collaboration with others committed to ending gun violence to hold Glock accountable for putting profits over public safety. It goes on to quote a couple of other officials, and it says, according to the complaints, the ease with which Glock pistols can be modified with Glock switches has gained national attention in the past few years for its unique and outsized role in worsening America's gun violence crisis. The switches are the size of a quarter and are easily purchased illegally online for around $20 or manufactured at home using a 3D printer. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives has reported a 400% increase in recoveries of illegally modified machine guns from 2020 to 2021 and a 570% increase in auto-sears from 2017 to 2021 as compared to the previous 5-year period. Once installed, Glock switches allow pistols to fire up to 1,200 rounds per minute, a rate as fast as or faster than many fully automatic firearms and machine guns used by the United States military. So again, you can go ahead and read more of that, but that was filed in Cook County Circuit Court using the Firearms Industry Liability Law that was approved by the legislature last year and signed by the governor. If you search my channel, you can find all kinds of stuff about that particular bill. I do want to quickly, before I share some of the conversation I had with John Curran, he is the Senate Minority Leader, we're going to get an update on the Firearm Industry Liability Act's status in federal courts where it's being challenged. But let's go ahead and hear back to the issue of the court's limiting law, where, again, Piasaw Armory challenging the firearm industry liability law, saying that they think it's unconstitutional. The state tried to move that case to Sangamon County from Madison County, but then Madison County found it unconstitutional. Well, now it's in front of the Illinois Supreme Court. Here is Senate Minority Leader John Curran reacting to that.
I mean, Greg, this is the second of what I would, I think are 3 laws that were broad constitutional overreaches passed last year and signed into law by the governor. Clearly we have a system. There's a appellate court's review. It goes to the Illinois Supreme Court. For the governor and all these judges around the state are duly elected by the voters, the citizens in their area. For the governor to say that he does not have faith in the vast majority, 100 or 102 counties of this state, the faith in the voters of those counties, that they're able to elect appropriate jurists, I think is really disheartening. It is good to see the court's ruling, and I will note that this case is really interesting because this case could actually strike down 2 of the governor's initiatives from last session, because the underlying case is a suit challenging the civil liability for firearms manufacturers that the governor signed into law. And that is another broad overreach that is really questionable constitutionally. And that was brought up and talked about extensively in debate. And that's the underlying case in this matter in Madison County.
And again, that's the Piasaw Armory case challenging the firearm industry liability law. But that was in state court, right? And you remember Thomas Mack, he dared the state to try to transfer it from Madison County to Sangamon County. And they attempted to do that, but the Madison County judge said, no, you guys can remote in down here for hearings. So I don't see what the problem is. This law is unconstitutional to try to limit individuals where they can sue the state. But again, the underlying law was being challenged was the firearms industry liability law. That's the same law that's being used by Chicago to challenge Glock to get them to pay and also to stop selling their popular firearms. But while that's going on, months ago, after the firearm industry liability law was signed by the governor, you had the National Shooting Sports Foundation sue the state. And that case, we got an update, actually, just this week. So nothing had happened in that case challenging the firearm industry liability law since December 11th. But then earlier this month, there was a motion to file a notice of supplemental authorities by the state. And then on the 18th, you had the judge order that defendant's motion to leave to file notice of supplemental authority is granted. The court will review and consider the supplemental authority with respect to pending motions. So Stacey Yandel, and this is in the Southern District of Illinois, moving forward with that case, but allowing for a notice of supplemental to be filed to kind of update some of the court proceedings that are going on there. So again, you've got a couple of different things going on here. You've got the firearm industry liability law that's being challenged in federal courts and in state court. And then you've got the court venue limit law that was trying to be used in the state court case in Madison County. And the Madison County judge said you can't use the court limit law. That's unconstitutional, let alone even dealing with what's going on with the firearm liability law. So now that's been appealed to the Illinois Supreme Court, the venue limit law. So now also you've got the city of Chicago using the firearm industry liability law to go after Glock. So while the firearm industry liability law maintains challenged in federal and state court, you've got Chicago moving forward trying to utilize that law in order to punish Glock. But back to John Curran, the Senate Minority Leader. I asked him, especially when it comes to this case challenging the court venue limit law in the Supreme Court of the state of Illinois, are there still concerns that it was a conflict of interest because Governor J.B. Pritzker, who signed this law, gave two of the Supreme Court justices $1 million each, let alone leaders of the legislative branch giving six figures to these candidates as well. Here's John Curran's reaction.
I think the Illinois Supreme Court will give the case a fair hearing. I do not question the integrity of the Illinois Supreme Court. And quite frankly, I don't question the integrity of the judicial system anywhere in the state of Illinois. It's the governor that is questioning the integrity of the judicial system in 100 of the 102 counties of this state. And that is, quite frankly, it's just wrong. You know, you're elected to be the chief executive of the state. You need to lead the entire state and stop looking at everything from just a Chicago or Cook County view. And that's clearly what the governor was doing in this instance.
So, Curran earlier had mentioned this is one of several laws that he says is unconstitutional that courts are looking at and finding unconstitutional. Another one is that law that was passed to allow for the Attorney General to go after crisis pregnancy centers for not offering up abortion. And you had a federal judge essentially say this is a stupid law. It's very likely unconstitutional. And then the state didn't even challenge that. They settled. And here's Curran.
They settled immediately. So a temporary restraining order was entered. The judge said this is likely unconstitutional, set the matter for a full hearing, and the state just caved. The governor caved because it was clear to pass a law. It was so blatantly unconstitutional that crisis pregnancy centers couldn't espouse anything written or verbal that could be taken as a negative view on abortion. I mean, that's not even close. So clearly, they passed a law for press pops to put out a press release, and then immediately, as soon as it was challenged, mea culpa, yeah, we were wrong. Clearly, they knew what they were doing from the beginning, and that was clearly unconstitutional.
And again, this is State Senate Minority Leader John Curran. He leads the Republicans in the Illinois Senate, and asked him if this is just one in a series of laws that are being challenged on constitutional grounds. What kinds of lessons should this send to the majority Democrats at the Illinois State House?
The broad overreach, when they bring these measures up, there is no discernment in trying to, and that needs to change. So, as we look at this legislative session, I hope they take some cautionary lessons from really what is mounting to be a very poor scorecard from what they enacted last year.
So again, Senate Minority Leader John Curran there. Appreciate him taking the time with me yesterday to discuss that and other issues. The state legislature's back in session today, and they've got a bunch of hearings and press conferences, and they've got until May 31st to pass a balanced budget with simple majorities. The governor wanting to spend $52.7 billion. But the budget's not the only thing. They could pass all kinds of other legislation. So we'll take a look at what goes on today, tomorrow with Bishop on Air. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Appreciate you guys being here each and every weekday morning. We'll be back at it. Follow me on X, follow me on Facebook, and be sure to catch the show live here with Bishop on Air.